Every person who works for him is either terrified of disappointing him or terrified of leaving him. He engineered both. The global collective looks at the landscape of modern technological empire building and credits the emergence of multi-planetary logistics, neural interfaces, and autonomous infrastructure to the power of inspiration. They watch corporate press releases and believe that thousands of world-class engineers destroy their health, abandon their personal relationships, and operate at the ragged edge of cognitive collapse because they are enchanted by a romantic vision of the future. This is a carefully curated public mythology, a narrative framework designed to mask the deployment of a highly sophisticated, unyielding psychological control architecture. The actual operational foundation of this empire is not inspiration. It is the deliberate, systemic distribution of existential debt. Elon Musk did not construct the world's most valuable automotive and aerospace networks through standard human resource protocols or compassionate workplace optimization. His core strategic competence is the clinical exploitation of human identity fusion. He looks at highly intelligent, exceptionally capable assets and identifies their deepest psychological vulnerability, their desperate need for transcendent meaning, their fear of a mundane existence, and their hunger to be classified as historical anomalies. He does not hire employees, he captures their processing units. He weaves their personal self-worth so deeply into the fabric of his existential milestones that departure from the enterprise is processed by their nervous system not as a career change, but as a form of spiritual suicide. If you are currently managing an enterprise, allocating capital, or building a professional trajectory under the comforting assumption that psychological safety is the only pathway to elite execution, you are operating with severe strategic blindness. You are analyzing the field through the lens of a middle manager while the true predator designs the ecosystem. Let us dissect the anatomy of the fear factory and examine how absolute compliance is engineered at the edge of human tolerance. To understand how an operator can extract thousands of hours of elite, uncompensated labor from individuals who possess the financial freedom to leave at any moment, one must first execute a surgical deconstruction of the corporate mission. In the standard commercial world, a mission statement is a sterile, compliance-driven paragraph drafted by public relations committees. It speaks of shareholder value, customer satisfaction, and incremental optimization. It is a low-leverage narrative that treats the employee as a merchant exchanging time for currency. The architecture of the fear factory rejects this commercial baseline. It upgrades the mission from a corporate objective to an existential ultimatum. The narrative is constructed with zero sentimentality. Humanity is facing an inevitable extinction event. The survival of consciousness across the stars is the singular variable that matters. The transition to sustainable energy is not an environmental preference, it is a mathematical requirement to prevent civilizational collapse. By reframing industrial production metrics as historical survival milestones, the operator performs a massive psychological leverage move. He establishes a state of permanent psychological debt within the asset. When you enter this ecosystem, you are told that your daily output, the speed of a manufacturing line, the density of a battery cell, or the compilation of an autonomous navigation script, is directly correlated with the survival of the human species. If you slow down, if you request balance, if you demand personal boundaries, you are not merely underperforming as an employee. You are actively sabotaging the future of humanity. You are proving yourself too soft, too small, and too insignificant to belong to the circle of historical architects. This is the ultimate identity trap. The operator recruits the asset's own high intellect and moral vanity to police their behavior. They voluntarily surrender their personal life, their health, and their autonomy because the alternative, admitting that they care more about their individual comfort than the salvation of consciousness, is a realization their ego cannot integrate. The mission ceases to be an inspirational target. It becomes a clinical containment architecture that makes compliance the only path to self-respect. The manifestation of this existential pressure is not delivered through gentle encouragement. It is sustained by an unyielding, high-efficiency system of designed biological strain, the 100-hour work week. Most management theorists argue that human cognitive capacity degrades exponentially after 40 hours of continuous labor. They produce papers, track errors, and advocate for recovery windows. The architecture of the Fear Factory bypasses this academic baseline entirely, utilizing chronic exhaustion as a deliberate mechanism of identity dissolution. When a human being operates under a permanent baseline of physical and mental fatigue, sleeping on factory floors, working through consecutive midnight cycles, and facing unyielding, impossible manufacturing deadlines, their cognitive architecture shifts. The prefrontal cortex, exhausted by continuous problem-solving and sensory overload, lowers its capacity for independent evaluation. The asset loses the psychological distance required to analyze their environment objectively. They stop asking whether they are being exploited, whether their compensation is proportional to their output, or whether the organizational culture is sustainable. Their world narrows to a singular, immediate coordinates, the next engineering sprint. This chronic strain triggers a powerful state of identity fusion. When you strip an individual of their hobbies, their family interactions, their sleep, and their external social anchors, you strip them of their multidimensional identity. They cease to be a father, a musician, an intellectual, or an independent entity. They become entirely defined by their operational utility within the corporate machinery. Their social unit is the team, their primary reference point is the leader, their only source of dopamine is the completion of an impossible target. The organization runs on a continuous flood of cortisol and adrenaline. These are not treated as indications of systemic failure, but as the exact fuel required to shatter conventional physical limitations. The asset begins to take a dark, twisted pride in their own destruction. They wear their sleep deprivation like a badge of honor, looking down upon the external corporate world as soft, mediocre, and unaligned. The operator has achieved absolute system optimization. The subjects have been systematically conditioned to love the very chains that exhaust them, processing their own burnout not as a warning to retreat, but as proof that they are operating at the peak of human capability. The maintenance of this high cortisol architecture requires the strategic distribution of acute trauma. This is executed through the calculated implementation of public humiliation as an organizational control system. In the geography of power, private criticism allows for negotiation, defense, and the preservation of the individual's ego. Public execution, however, serves a completely different, systemic function. It is not an act of erratic anger, it is the deliberate projection of absolute vulnerability across the entire collective. Consider the documented operational accounts of executive review sessions within the automotive and aerospace facilities. The leader enters an engineering bay or a design terminal not to collaborate, but to perform an audit of absolute compliance. If a senior vice president, a world-class engineer, or a critical operations director presents data that contains a single margin of vagueness, a delayed timeline, or an excuse based on conventional supply chain limitations, the response is sharp, immediate, and surgically devastating. The individual is not pulled aside for coaching, they are verbally dismantled, stripped of their authority, or terminated on the spot, in front of their entire engineering team. This public execution sends an immediate, primitive shockwave through the nervous system of every observer in the room. By executing a high-status asset in a public setting, the leader demonstrates a terrifying law of the ecosystem: no one is safe. No amount of past contribution, no level of unique intellect, and no degree of historical loyalty will shield you from immediate liquidation if your current utility drops below the line of absolute optimization. The observers do not judge the leader for his cruelty, they process the event through the lens of their own immediate survival instinct. They look at their ruined colleague and realize that the only way to avoid becoming the next specimen on the corporate floor is to double their output, eliminate any trace of friction from their reports, and execute the master's directives with absolute, unquestioning speed. Fear is not managed individually, it is distributed across the entire corporate grid through a single, targeted strike. The public humiliation of one asset secures the hypervigilant compliance of 1,000 survivors. Most business schools teach that the primary responsibility of leadership is the preservation of organizational stability. They instruct managers to establish predictable workflows, protect standard operating procedures, and create a sense of certainty that allows employees to plan their long-term trajectories. The architecture of the fear factory systematically rejects stability, utilizing the deliberate manufacture of organizational chaos as a supreme weapon of control. The ecosystem is kept in a state of permanent, artificial volatility. Sudden, sweeping corporate restructurings are executed overnight. Massive, unannounced layoffs are deployed without warning, liquidating entire departments through automated emails that disconnect employee access badges at the front gate. Radical, impossible shifts in product engineering are demanded weeks before a scheduled public launch, forcing teams to scrap months of meticulous work and restart from absolute zero. To the conventional management consultant, this volatility looks like erratic, undisciplined leadership. It looks like an executive defect. But from the clinical perspective of power dynamics, chaos is a masterfully deployed dependency anchor. Certainty is a dangerous asset in a subordinate. Certainty creates comfort, comfort encourages autonomy, and autonomy invites the individual to question the authority of the ruler. When you keep an organization in a state of permanent instability, you completely destroy the asset's capacity for independent positioning. They cannot form internal political alliances because the corporate structure changes every 90 days. They cannot negotiate for better terms because they are constantly fighting to prove their immediate relevance to avoid the next wave of liquidation. They cannot plan a life outside the enterprise because their entire cognitive energy is consumed by navigating the current day's structural crisis. Chaos forces the entire collective into a state of absolute, childlike dependency on the singular will of the leader. He becomes the only permanent variable in their universe, the only fixed point of authority in a sea of shifting corporate noise. They don't look for safety in the rules, because the rules do not exist. They look for safety in absolute, real-time alignment with his immediate preferences. The finality of this psychological autopsy forces you to sit with an uncomfortable, unyielding truth that the modern corporate narrative attempts to suppress. The global market does not reward moral alignment, it rewards structural output. The tactics executed within the fear factory are universally condemned by human resource blogs, progressive management consultants, and public ethics committees. They label the culture as toxic, unsustainable, and destructive to the human spirit. Yet, the raw data of global capitalism delivers a completely contradictory verdict. This precise architecture of existential debt, chronic exhaustion, public execution, and designed chaos has produced the most valuable, dominant, and disruptive corporate networks in the history of the modern world. It has shattered centuries-old monopolies, outpaced global state-sponsored competitors, and consolidated unprecedented capital leverage under a single executive node. The world lines up to buy the products, capitalize the equity, and celebrate the historical legacy, while pretending to mourn the human cost of the extraction. This creates the ultimate divide between the amateur and the ruler. The amateur looks at the story of the fear factory and experiences moral outrage. They wish the world operated on the principles of mutual validation and gentle encouragement. They are blind to the underlying biology of human performance. The true rulers look past the public relations theater and study the raw mechanics of compliance. They recognize that the highest levels of human output are rarely achieved in states of peaceful equilibrium. They are extracted when highly capable assets are pushed into environments where execution is the only available exit hatch for their existential terror. You must look at your own enterprise, your own career, and your own capital networks, and ask yourself which game you are truly playing. If you are optimizing for the comfort of being liked, you are building a fragile, short-term structure that will be easily disrupted by a more ruthless competitor. If you want to build an empire that dictates the terms of civilizational reality, you must possess the psychological hardness to build a factory that turns fear into pure, compounding leverage. If everything Musk does is psychological manipulation, then why are the most talented people on Earth still lining up to work for him?